Hello, middle school students. Welcome to another Step Up Chapel. It is me, your middle school counselor again, Mr. Cruz. As you remember, we have talked about many different themes over the past few months for our Step Up Chapels. Identity, technology, generosity, and most recently, grit. For the month of February, we are going to be talking about diversity and how to love our neighbors. I'm not sure if you are aware of this, but just 2 weeks ago, we had a Monday off of school, and this February is a special month. The month of February is Black History Month, and just 2 weeks ago, we had school off for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So to start off this chapel, we are going to have a little refresher on who Martin Luther King Jr. is from Kid President.
Once upon a time, there's a man named Martin Luther King Jr. It's funny to think about because now we know his name so well, but at one time, he was just a kid. Like maybe you're a kid watching this. Well, he was a kid too. Well, maybe you're a grown-up. That's okay too. Former kids are welcome here. I don't discriminate. Martin Luther King grew up to be a great man, of course. But things weren't all that great in the world while he was growing up. Not everybody was treated like they were somebody. And I believe that you should treat everybody like it's their birthday. But they didn't do that. People looked at the color of their skin. And that's how they decided if they were friends or not. Not cool, man. That didn't make him feel good. That didn't make anybody feel good. But his parents helped him grow up. He went to church. He learned about love. He grew up to be a minister to help a lot of people. He did all sorts of cool stuff. He helped a lot of people learn about love too. But still, he looked around and said, things should be better. He wanted to change things, so he did stuff. He decided instead of spreading the hate, he would spread the love. He wanted to bring people together. Where people were hurting, he stepped in to help. He marched with them. He walked with them. He walked arm in arm with everyone. And sometimes it didn't go well, but he kept going. Sometimes he ended up in prison, but he kept going. Some people didn't like him, but he kept going. Some days were hard, but he kept going. Love does that. It just keeps going, even when things are dark. And, well, I don't like this part of the story, but things did get pretty dark. Someone who didn't agree with him shot him. He died in April 1968. Now, Kid President, why are you telling us this sad story? Come on. I know. I'm sorry, but it happened. I don't like that happened. Now, I gotta tell you something. When things aren't awesome, it can be tough. And things will always be awesome, but your response can be. Martin Luther King's response? It was awesome. Today, I just wanted us to think about this. Isn't it cool that we can change things? Like any of us, anybody. He dreamed and he changed things. And he dreamed and he kept sharing his dreams. They became not just his dream, a lot of people's dream. Like this one. I have a dream that little black boys and black girls will join hands with white boys and white girls and become sisters and brothers. That's a pretty good dream. Let's dream like that. That could change things.
So awesome. I think Kid President is the coolest. As we talked about grit last month and what it means to keep persevering towards your goals, I think Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. definitely embodied grit. He kept going and kept working hard to love others and make sure everyone was loved and treated equally, regardless of what they looked like or the color of their skin. He kept persevering even when others hated him or tried to stop him, all the way until the end of his life. His dream that he shared, I have a dream that little black boys and little black girls will join hands with little white girls and little white boys and become sisters and brothers. I hope that can be our dream too, that we at Sioux Falls Christian will go out, build relationships, and love people regardless of what they look like and regardless of the color of their skin. So the next person who's going to share with us is Haley Wiggers. So she is an awesome woman of faith who currently works at a church here in Sioux Falls. She works at Central Church, and she's going to share a little bit about her story as a biracial person, meaning her mom is white and her dad is black. And we can all learn from hearing her story as we try to understand more about God's vision for diversity and how we can be intentional about better loving our neighbor.
Hi, Sioux Falls Christian students. My name is Haley Wiggers. I am the Connections Director at a church here in town called Central Church. And I am grateful to get a chance to lead this chapel video service for you in honor of Black History Month, just to get to share a little bit about my story with you and shed some light on what it is like to be a person who is a biracial person, a person who is whose racial makeup is two different races. So my mom is white and my dad was Black. And I'm excited and grateful and humbled to get this opportunity to share a little bit about what that's been like for me, and ultimately to help you see God's vision and hope for diversity and what it looks like to love and care for your neighbor, because all people are made in the image of God. So I'm going to read an essay I actually wrote for you a couple of years ago when I was in seminary. But first, I want you to imagine that you're maybe sitting around a dinner table with some of your close family members around Thanksgiving time. And this for me was when I had some realizations about my family's past and what that means for my life and my future. So that's where I find myself when we enter this story. So I'm going to read it for you and then share some thoughts at the end. And I'll talk about it at the end, but if anything arises in you as you're watching this, if you have questions, if you have things you would like to process to, ask an adult or a teacher or someone you know and trust, or feel free to reach out to me here at Central, and I'd be happy to talk with you. So I am going to read this for you, and I'm grateful that you're taking the time to watch and to listen. So as I stare across the room at the people who laid down the path before me, I can't help but notice the grace that is present through it all. To my right is my mom, hardworking, independent. Her eyes look tired from a long week of preparing her home, feeding her family, and a life of loving the people that sit at her table. On her right is her own mother, the mother that cares for her husband and the mother that she now cares for, as if returning the favor. She grins a short grin, the one that indicates both pride in her parents' legacies and nostalgia for the days where life didn't seem as short. She turns her head and looks at me on her left, grinning a similar grin, but one that says to me that her current joy cannot even be expressed in words. Across the table, down to my left, is my dad. Gentle and perseverant, he's content in the fact that my family is here, together with food on the table and laughter bouncing from our mouths. On his left is his father-in-law, the father-in-law that is losing his hearing but still growing in heart. The father-in-law with a twinkle in his eye places this bigger-than-life hands on my dad's shoulder and out of the corner of his mouth whispers, "I'm so glad you are in this family." And to this my dad says, "I wouldn't have it any other way." He enters back into the conversation, I'm sure with the history he shares with this family flashing through his mind. These are the days where my parents are realizing that their impact is running thin, and as they have taught most of what their kids have to learn, and watch their parents and in-laws live lives that they both desire to embody and remold. You see, my parents, sandwiched between the generations of caring for nearly adult children and rapidly aging parents, think that the story of their own life is often surpassed by those that they care for. But little do they know that in this very moment, a culmination of both of their lives and the lives of many people around this table have been influenced perhaps because of one yes they said to love, to justice, and change. This yes goes back to the days of the 80s, the days of their youth, the days where the relationship was young, but interracial tension, unfortunately, was not. It may be helpful to tell you that my mom is white and my dad is Black. Information fairly crucial to this story. My mom, a small-town girl raised in a farming family as the youngest child, lived life attempting to prove that just because she was a girl didn't mean she was a wimp. She worked just as hard as the men in her family and was just as tough. She played on the boys' basketball team and won many awards. She attended Sunday school and had the seeming reflection of the perfect child. As a young white woman in the 80s, her battle with the world was proving that she was not any less because she was female. My dad, a large city guy, raised in the apartments of Denver by his grandmother as the eldest son. He spent most of his time working and playing basketball, helping care for his sisters and staying out of trouble. He was obedient to his grandmother and learned to treat women and all people with respect and dignity, even though that was not often how they were treated. As a young black man in the 80s, his battle with the world was proving that he was not any less of a human because of the color of his skin. Fast forward to the time where they were dating, both attending a small private Christian college, but looking for their place in the world. Their love at the time seemed like a Romeo and Juliet affair, star-crossed lovers in a small-town land, simply 20 minutes from my mom's home, a town that was still working through what it looks like to actually see interracial friendships, let alone interracial romantic relationships. Needless to say, the first time my mom brought my dad home, the first time my mother's parents met my dad was not the first time they had thought about the implications of their relationship on the world. My mom once put it this way: my parents were the most devout of followers of the Lord. They always taught us to love people of all colors, yellow, green, red, blue, or black. You just don't marry them. You might be able to imagine how the unraveling of the story goes from there. Let me put it this way. Imagine coming home during the holidays to a noose, what they used to lynch and kill black people, hanging on the basketball hoop. Have you ever been ignored or made fun of because of the color of your skin, or seen this happen to someone close to you? My mom's parents, my grandparents, had a hard time seeing past the color of my dad's skin, even knowing how much my mom loved my dad. My mom believed that God was disciplining her for loving me too much. That by wanting to marry a black man, God was indicating that she had put too much love, too much favoritism in me as the perfect child. That even in her love for me, God was calling her to love himself even more, my mom would say. I can't imagine the pain of this reality. The division between family members because of the race of who one chose to love. Yet the call they faced to remain true, to love one another, to be together in the face of racism and hurt they felt was a call directly from God. This yes, they said to one another and to God, came at a price. My mom had to give up her privilege as a white woman in a small conservative town. She had to give up her family for a time in order to gain someone who loved her more than life itself. My dad had to give up the need to prove himself, to attempt to prove that his dark skin was not a threat. He had to give up a desire to stay under the radar because interracial couples stood out like a sore thumb during that time. They both had to give up their image and understand the looks they would get as they entered restaurants, grocery stores, Office Max, and even churches because of the symbol that their marriage stood for. Eventually, they would have to give up the safety, protection, and the innocence of the 3 girls they would bring into the world. For these were the children, the literal byproducts of racial reconciliation. Yet, for me and my sisters, what our light brown skin and curly hair would say to the world is that life is neither black nor white. Excuse me. As you listen, I hope that you're still picturing the image of my mom and my dad and my mom's parents sitting together at our Thanksgiving table. You might be wondering what became of my parents' and grandparents' relationship. You might be wondering what is becoming of that relationship now. What I can tell you now is that just about the arrival of my oldest sister, my grandparents, by the grace of God, came around. Not only did they come around, but they still apologize to this day for the harm, the hurt, and the pain that they put my parents through. And somehow, also by the grace of God, my parents forgave them. But all of this forgiveness was bought at a price. And all of this forgiveness is still unraveling in the lives of me and my 2 older sisters and our own stories of being somewhere in the spectrum between black and white. My earliest memory of an awareness that something was different about me, about the way I looked, takes place in the checkout line at a grocery store. Little me, brown-eyed and hair somewhat reflecting Cosmo Kramer from Seinfeld, overheard a woman ask my mom a peculiar question. If you don't know who Kramer is, which many of you probably don't, I encourage you to look it up. The woman said something like, "Your little girl is so beautiful. Is she adopted?" I'm sure with confidence, gusto, and a bit of frustration, my mom responded with a resounding no. This was not the only time that question would be asked of my mother in this life. I always wondered why people would ask that. To me, our family was nothing but normal. Unfortunately, the rest of the world, even growing up, didn't see it that way. It was not hard for me and my sisters to catch on to society's portrayal of Black people. We knew that people did not trust Black people. My oldest sister recalls being followed around a clothing store by a sales clerk when she was with a white friend, but the sales clerk did not follow her friend. Racial microaggressions, hidden ways of being unkind or hurtful because of the color of someone's skin, were hardly micro. Even though we were only half Black, we knew the styles to avoid, the groups of people to hang out with, and the kind of image to portray to avoid being labeled as anything derogatory or threatening to society. We were brown enough to be reminded that the staring our family gets in public places might not be because we're tall or because people are wanting to wave and be friendly, but because we don't exactly look like the average American family. Of course, you could say that we got away with a lot because we were light enough to get to take on the label as white. We never experienced explicit violence and upfront racism. We got all the privileges of being white while still being able to contribute to conversations of what it meant to be a person of color. However, the confusion only arose when people would make comments like, "Because you're Black, does that mean you can dance?" Or, "Can you afro your hair?" People didn't understand that not all characteristics of Blackness carry over to every person of color. Neither did they understand the dilemma when they would say things like, "You are the whitest Black person that I've ever met." What in the world is that supposed to mean? In college, I was faced with some of the most subliminal racism I've had the privilege of not facing the rest of my life. Being used for advertisements because I'm photogenic and appreciated at a surface level, only to bring up the diversity count and not actually help change the experience for other students of color. Told me that I'm only valuable because I help the image of an institution. And then almost as if to tribute to my parents' story, I meet a tall, blonde-haired Dutch man. Early in our relationship, he told me that someone asked him if he really wanted to date a Black girl, as if they were saving him from some kind of destruction. And he didn't just date a half Black girl. He married her. Our relationship to me is a further unraveling of the story that brought me into existence. While the cultural moment of today in many ways is different from the time my parents' budding marriage, the sacrifices they made to get to where they are have allowed me to experience a piece of life that is both in itself redeemed and on its way to redemption. My story, intermixed with my husband's, is one that is redeeming what it means for life to neither be Black nor white. My increasing awareness of the reality of my family's history with race came at the expense of pain and hurt, ostracism and confusion, and a false sense that we only belong in binary categories. I acknowledge that I have much of the privileges of being white, but also experience racism that comes with being a person of color. I never know if I can speak to the experience of being a minority because I also dance in the line of being a majority. In any given day, my racial identity would transform to being white, Black, and kind of white, a little Black, or something in between. However, I'm growing to understand that maybe I don't have to choose. I can be both. And because of the collision of my white mom and Black dad's historical and physical DNA, a revolution is breaking in. And as a result, I represent both sides of the same coin, rolling towards reconciliation. I'm not ignorant enough to believe that the final bookend of the struggle and story is this beautiful, colorful family of mine can be close either. There is more of the story out in the world beyond my own family, and that has been left untold and left in need of reconciliation. But there is redemption yet to come. As I'm drawn back into this moment of sitting around a table, staring across the room at people who laid down the path before me, I can't help but notice the grace that's present. A father-in-law who let go of fear and judgment, embraces my dad who once was labeled as the other. My mom, once ostracized and made stranger, looks at her parents in love and compassion. But there are still people around this table, more people. 2 sisters, a brother-in-law, and a husband. People influenced by the same path, yet who help lay down a foundation for the future. Some might say this moment is a moment of shalom, a moment where the past, present, and future all intertwine and culminate in some sort of flourishing. Shalom means flourishing for all. Nothing is missing. Nothing is out of place. All things are made right. I'm reminded that shalom comes at a cost. But in these moments of shalom, we get glimpses of God making all things right. It is sweet and signifies an even sweeter, bigger picture of God's kingdom to come. So I hope this story helps you see a little bit about what it was like for me growing up with a fairly complicated racial identity. I hope that you can stop and think more about the people in your life and how God might be present in those faces of people who look different from you, and how might God be present in your relationships with those people. I hope we can move beyond mere acceptance for the people who are different from us, racially or culturally, and truly embrace them because God made them unique and celebrates that with them. I believe God wants us to see our differences and how God is using them to teach us something about Himself and His kingdom. The image of God dwells in all of us. If you are a student who is also a student of color, I want you to know that God loves you for all of you. And your skin color is actually a huge and valuable part of who God made you to be. If you are not a student who is a person of color, how might you celebrate and embrace the stories and lives of those who are different from you? Maybe you can remember my story and think to yourself, who else might have a similar experience? How can I get to know them and try to understand what their experience is like? So I hope this story was helpful for you and gave you a chance to step into someone else's shoes. Again, if you are a student who has more questions or wants to process, I encourage you to ask someone that you trust. But I also encourage you to reach out to me if you'd like, and I would love to process with you what that looks like and how to be a better neighbor and how to care for people who look different from you, and what it means for you if you're a person who is a person of color or comes from a different culture than what you're used to and what's primary at Sioux Falls Christian. So thank you for letting me take some time to share with you guys. I hope you have a great day and a great month.
Thank you for sharing, Haley, and for allowing us the opportunity to step into someone else's shoes. If any students would like to talk with Haley, she would love to connect with you more about this topic, or if you just wanted to chat about life. I shared her email address with your teachers, and if you would like to talk with her, please reach out to one of your teachers, or if you want to, I want you to know you can always come talk with me, and I can share her information with you as well. So, I wanted to close this chapel with a few short discussion questions to talk about in your homerooms. I also have a Black History Month inspiring quotes crossword puzzle that I want to pass along to you guys. So if you complete this puzzle, and again, just like last month, if you come show it to me, you're going to be entered into a special drawing this time that we're going to do next month for our Step Up Chapel. So thank you guys, and I'll talk to you guys later.